Do a quick rundown of all my guitar pedals real quick. We'll start with my very first one ever. That was getting me to a friend of mine in church camp. He had plenty of tuners and pedals, and he gave me that one to start off my board. First ever board was one of those Roadrunner cases. It was a bag. It was like a bag with Velcro in the bottom, and the bottom of it had, the bottom was Velcro, so that's where I attached all my pedals. And that was my first ever one. My second pedal, the first pedal I ever bought, paid money for, actually I don't have anymore. It fell apart on me. It was a Vox Wah-Wah. Don't even know the brand name. It's the one you buy at Guitar Center. It's everybody's first pedal. Is like under $100, which for a young kid was like, took months to save up and to convince mom, or I think it was actually my stepdad, to drive me to the store to go get. But I had it, and it was my second pedal. And then my third pedal was once I had my driver's license. It was my first ever overdrive pedal. I knew from Stevie Ray Vaughan and from all the other cats, all the other great guitar players, Kirk Hammett, just about everybody I listened to, all played an Ibanez Tube Screamer. All the guys that I watched locally, they all had Tube Screamers, and one of my greatest guitar influences, Jason Elmore, had was this one with 4 knobs. I didn't know what the four knobs meant. I didn't know what the difference between any of these three were. But that one was at a pawn shop for a good deal, and I bought it. That's one of my favorite overdrive pedals, even to this day. But to this day, it's actually broken, doesn't work very well. And the only thing different between this one and these other two, I say the only thing different, the main difference is this knob. It's the normal mode, plus mode, hot, and turbo. But funny enough, all of those, like from TS9, once you go to here, up, they all actually sound worse. And none of them are really useful and sound good. The TS9 mode sounds the best, but it doesn't sound like the TS9. For whatever reason, it sounds different. It sounds better. Second or maybe third pedal, that Aquapus may have came first. But this Green Rhino, which is, you'll know a theme with guitar pedals. If it's a drive pedal and it's green, or actually most drive pedals in general, they're trying to be one of these pedals. Got it next, because it's like a Tube Screamer Plus. It's like a Tube Screamer, but a little bit louder, a little bit more bass, other cool features, which will kind of boost us into our second category here. Got Tube Screamers here. That's a TS9, TS8, 08. Both, all three good. They all do the same thing. Actually, the Boss Super Overdrive does the same thing as well. But our next category is kind of like Tube Screamer Plus, which is kind of like this one. So my all-time favorite guitar player, one of them, Joey Love, I would always see him play live on Wednesday nights at the Cadillac Pizza in McKinney, and he would play an overdrive pedal. He would play through like a clean jazz amp with a Paul Reed Smith McCartney, and he would step on an overdrive pedal and have this beautiful sustain and mid-range and harmonic content. It was perfect. It was beautiful. But it looked like a Tube Screamer, but it had a different foot switch. It had like one of these foot switches. And I didn't know as a kid. I thought they were all just Tube Screamers. And I thought, man, I want to buy one of those. But it was actually a Keeley modded Tube Screamer, which has quite a bit more gain, low end, cleaner too. This just has way more sweep to the volume and tone. Everything just is a Tube Screamer Plus kind of idea. And Keeley stopped making pedals, or stopped modding pedals, I should say. They got to where they were big enough to where they didn't just mod Tube Screamers or Boss Blues drivers or Boss DD pedals. They just started making their own. And the Red Dirt, minus the germanium, which is a red pedal, was that modification basically. Basically, Keeley said, hey, we're making our own Tube Screamer, and it's our own modded Tube Screamer version. It's in our own box now. This one I got at a guitar store in Hawaii, and it's the germanium version. I don't know what the difference is, but it sounds good. It's definitely that Tube Screamer Plus, and it's definitely that tone that Joey had. But moving on to Joey and to other guitar players, Joey, in a combination of using that Tube Screamer, also used BB preamp. Same kind of thing, loads of bottom end, top end, juicy harmonics. Funny enough, his pedal actually had that too, where the knob actually broke from dropping it or something. So I think that's kind of cool and have to mind. It's kind of a bittersweet moment when that broke. It's like, oh, it kind of looks like his, but it's also kind of like, broke my pedal. Knob works fine still. It's just cosmetic. And another great guitar player that was everyone in my hometown's hero, Andy Timmons. Many hometowns heroes. He's one of the best guitar players in the world. But he was a big champion of the BB preamp, and he was from where I am from. So all the local guys, all my local guitar playing counterparts and peers, all had a BB preamp. So I had to save up a lot to get one of those. Speaking on that Keeley thing, this is kind of jumping to a different category, but he also used to mod the Keeley Blues driver, as I mentioned earlier. Or sorry, the Boss Blues driver, as I mentioned earlier. And similar to that Tube Screamer, this is the Boss Blues driver modded pedal. It's their own pedal though now. And Andy Timmons uses that very much as like for his blues, crunchy, in-between tone. He'll have that on all the time and work his volume knob. So it's kind of like actually cleaner than the amp, kind of a crystal clear type clean, while also getting some, like as you roll up the volume, getting some crunch to it, but not necessarily always having it full on. And I bought that pedal for that effect, and it works very, very well. Also works kind of well for like a Matt Schofield rig. Matt Schofield uses a different pedal, actually a Mad Professor pedal that I don't have, for that same effect. And so like kind of clean all positions on a Strat. You can keep this on all night. I've done it before with the Super. If I have the Super kind of medium volume-ish, I'll keep that on all night and work my volume knob and have great blues tones, and then switch it off, go to the back pickup, the bridge pickup on the Strat with this, with, you know, maybe a little bit less that, you know, something like that kind of setting, and killer solo tones, you know. I guess since we're going into different categories here, let's go into kind of not Tube Screamer Plus, but kind of just gainier, heavier overdrives, which the BB preamp definitely also fits into. I kind of have them organized that way, as you'll see. Landgraf overdrive, one of those that back in the early days of boutique building, this pedal was a big deal. Now I don't know how much, if it's worth what its market rate is, like a $400 pedal. Probably nowadays it may get it because it's rare or something. But number one hero influence of all time, Jason Elmore always played one of those. He always had that Tube Screamer, and then another gain stage tremolo pedal, and then a Boss delay. And that second gain stage, although I saw this on his board one time, again, common theme around North Texas, everyone had a BB preamp, but most of the time he used this. And so those gain tones I always kind of chased after, and I always thought it was a secret was in the pedal. Turns out the secret's in the hands, folks. As you'll know, this is kind of a useless video, right? Secret's in the hands, but he did use this pedal, and it really does get that tone, that kind of cranked up Marshall in a box. It's like, you know, this is the asymmetric switching knob, which most all overdrives nowadays, if they have a three-way switch like this pedal or other ones, it's what that does. It's like kind of like that Tube Screamer, clean boost. Oh, it's not clean, but kind of a booster type thing. In the bottom positions, like a fat Marshall distortion-y thing, which is the way I use it. I think Jason used it in that top setting. Either way, it's got great gain, great sustain. Cool pedal. Very, very dim LED and kind of noisy knobs, but it's also probably like a 20-year-old pedal at this point. So note to self, all other kids, buy old amps, buy old guitars, buy new pedals. Don't buy old ones. Maybe we'll get to that a little bit later. Boss, or sorry, MXR FET driver. It's a Joe Bonamassa pedal. Sounds cool. It's a lot better for the house, to getting like dirty tones live. It can get a little muddy and kind of be lost in the mix, but it's great tone. I have it next to the Golden Cello. Golden Cello's one. It's kind of like that Eric Johnson lead tone in a box, but the reason why I have those two together is the distortion on this, they're very, very similar. This one's cool though because it has a delay feature. So it's, again, like that Eric Johnson, it kind of has that tape delay, a faux tape delay built into the lead sound. So it's kind of a instant lead tone. You step on it and the delay and the distortion come on at the same time. Inside, there's internal trim pots to adjust that delay. That's just like a level for how loud you want it. But the amount that it's on there is pretty much perfect. Another Mad Professor pedal. This is something pedals will do often. They'll have a focus knob or some other name for a tone knob, but it's kind of what it does. They say it changes the character of the overdrive as it's further here, as it's over here. You know, it changes the character. So yeah, well, you know, same thing will happen when you turn this knob. You know, maybe this one is better. Maybe it works better than like an older Tube Screamer type pedal or like that Boss pedal. But that's what it does. They just kind of change that for marketing, so don't get too caught up on names like that. And you know, I may be selling it short. It may actually do something like that. But what I'm like technology wise, like inside there, it may be a different circuit than that. But what I'm telling you is the effect is usually the same. We kind of already talked about the Fat Mod. Another kind of booster pedal, great boost pedal. This is actually so cool. I'm gonna plug it in real quick to show you how cool this one is. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe I will. Maybe do a little aside video to it. Actually, let's go and plug it up. No, we won't plug it up. We won't plug it up. What would happen is if you held down this switch, the LED would change from green to red. And this one, it's not a 3-knob pedal. It's actually two 1-knob pedals and kind of built into one. Normally, this will be like a larger 2-foot switch pedal, where like one side would be a boost and then the other side would be a mid boost. And you hold down that button and it switches from one to the other. And then whenever you click it, it just always comes on. That's what that weird symbol means. Boost kind of boosts all frequencies, just makes a whole bunch just louder. Kind of usable, but what's really cool is that mid boost. Switch over to the red setting and it boosts really those frequencies you kind of want to boost. So not maybe some nasty, woofy, low-end ones or high, sparkly ones you don't want out of your guitar or your amp. If you do want just more of everything, that side works. But if you want like, hey, some settings don't work and you want more of what, you know, people are going to hear and like, that mid boost works. Mid Q doesn't have a very good sweep, but that would basically, if you can imagine like an EQ broadband, the mids, it kind of shifts the mids left or right, but it's still kind of a mid frequency. The switch does a lot more for that mid frequency, than the mid Q knob does. One of my earliest pedals, early along the days of these two, was this Marshall Bluesbreaker. I was a huge fan of John Mayer back when in my early days of guitar playing. I thought he just hung the moon. Turns out he was just playing a lot of the cool licks. Once I started listening to like, hey, who does John Mayer listen to? And I listened to like Eric Clapton, you know, Stevie Ray, B.B. King, a lot of other guitar players that kind of influenced him. I was kind of like, he's kind of, he's just, you know, my taste kind of changed, I should say. But his tone was one of my favorites growing up, but he was kind of imitating their tone. I kind of found their tone a little bit more appeasing to my ear. This is one of the pedals that he used in the early days. This along with a Klon type boost, which I'll show you here in a second. And, of course, a Tube Screamer. He actually used a TS-10, which I used to own, which I sold, which I should also mention. There's a lot of pedals here that I've had in the past, I've lost. Some pedals I've sold and bought back because they were so freaking good. This is one I'll never, ever get rid of, mainly because it might be worth some money someday. It was discontinued in the 90s, but it was one of John's favorite pedals, and that kind of gave it a demand in the market, was because, you know, there's a new guy with a cool tone playing this old school pedal that people normally would have just ignored, and maybe for good reason. There's something to the pedal, but at the same time, it doesn't do it's not the best in the world. Notice how all the knobs are set all at 3 o'clock. They're all kind of almost boosted. And that's because this particular one, any other setting doesn't really sound good. I mean, if you got the volume from here and you turned it here, it didn't sound good. Turned it here, it didn't sound good. Treble from here to here sounded pretty good, you know, but anywhere over here, unusable. Gain, same thing, like that was it. And kind of from here, it turned into like a heavy overdrive, which was kind of weird. You kind of wanted this. Reason why we like the Bluesbreakers, because it's kind of a clean, didn't really touch your tone too much, kind of just made everything better, what they would call a transparent overdrive, but not quite a boost. Kind of gave it a little bit of crunch and hair too. But today's, because particular type of overdrive and this particular pedal became so popular, modern builders started coming along and doing their own interpretation of it. There's hundreds of overdrives now that are this style of pedal. The best one I think on the market, which I used to own, which don't anymore, was a JHS product, that company right there, JHS Morningstar. If you're in the market for one of these, don't buy this one, spend your money on the Morningstar, unless you like old things. But again, let's get into this discussion now. Old things like this rock. Old things like this break. Yeah, they just break, guys. Pedal switch doesn't work. You can kind of even see how it works. That compared to like, oh, yeah, one of these, which is like totally different thing. This one doesn't even click, but it comes on and on. Great switches. Yeah, these good pedals, I could just switch their switches all day long. These switches, they don't work too well. Boss pedals, man, Boss pedals are great, but they break. They just break. This pedal, I'm afraid to use it. And it's one of those where, you know, you have to have everything set a certain way for it to sound good. That Morningstar, you can put the knobs any way and you're gonna get different tones out of it. This is kind of in the same realm of this kind of category, the heavy overdrive. This is the Andy Timmons signature pedal. So Andy Timmons uses Blues preamp, or the BB preamp, in conjunction with his lead channel on a lot of his Mez Boogie amplifiers, but eventually got to the point where he was using the clean channel and always just putting pedals in front of it for all his tones. And this is his lead channel in a box. This particular one has a boost on it. I bought it because it was secondhand. Honestly, I don't care for the boost section at all. It doesn't sound good on its own, and adding it, because it's before the distortion, when you add boost to distortion, you just kind of get more distortion and more compression and more sag. And I would prefer it if it was just the overdrive side. It's kind of like a Marshall JCM 800, a modded JCM 800, so kind of like an 80s heavy metal, high mid-range, top end, gain, chewy distortion. It's beautiful. Again, EQ is kind of a full around knob. Tone knob. Air is just another presence knob, kind of high-end knob. Two knobs, one's kind of more for high frequencies, more is kind of mid-range frequencies. This switch, they say, is like, oh, it's a 100 watt amp, a 50 watt amp, and then a 5 watt amp. But really, I think the switch does something very similar to this one, just kind of a different naming convention. Last of drive pedals, let's do the Sabracadabra. It's kind of cool. It's basically a distortion pedal, not really a drive like he's. Not good for solo tones, but good for just crunchy, heavy metal. It's, as you can kind of tell from the branding here, it's heavily influenced by like that Tony Iommi Black Sabbath tone. Gain, range, which kind of applies if he was using a treble booster. Presence, high end. You can get this to be very, very thin and crunchy, to also being kind of like a fuzz. Really, really cool pedal. And I love how the volume says volume 4, because as we know, the greatest Black Sabbath record of all time is volume 4. Moving to, I guess, compression pedals. This one was my first one. It was given to me by my hero, Jason Elmore. Cool pedal, a lot of squash, very good for like country kind of compression tone, but it's also very noisy. You know, is what it is. This one is one that he used on his, actually we got from Monty Montgomery, as being the ultimate acoustic pedal. You put this on with your acoustic, and it really gives you a lot of attack, a lot of bite, a lot of sustain, which acoustics really don't have whenever you play them live. You can kind of sound like you're just going plink, 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 instead of having notes sustain like they do on electric. This kind of gives you that sustain. And he told me, he said, no other compression works. The CS3 doesn't work. No other brand of them works. It has to be this one. And I would agree. But technology has gotten better, and this is one of the most expensive pedals on the entire board here. And it could honestly, it could be like transparent, like it could do nothing, you know, sometimes, but sometimes it could do something. It's a studio quality the Cali 76. It's based off of a 1176, which is a studio compressor. It's one that goes in like a studio on like a board and works. It's on like every major record is one of those compressors. But this is made into a pedal version. So that's what it is. It's like a studio quality pedal to refine your instruments. It's actually an instrument. It's not even just a guitar pedal. But I do similar settings from this. You can get this kind of tone out of this pedal along with 100 other sounds with this one. And it's way louder and more clear than the old Boss. Use it with, pardon the cryberry box, the LR Bags preamp right there, which is really good to make your guitar sound more organic, and it has a lot of functional things. It's very good for gigging. It's helped solve a lot of the problems that gigging with a acoustic does. This into that, into a delay pedal, which we'll talk about here next, and that's your acoustic sound, acoustic tone. Let's see, going next, we have some delay pedals back here, like I mentioned. That's my pedal power of choice if I'm not using batteries. Works very well, very functional, has a lot of outputs. One pedal I always enjoyed hearing other people when I played before it and really thought tone sounded good for a very affordable, great delay is the Carbon Copy, just Carbon Copy. It's a little bit darker green color. This is the Carbon Copy Bright because it was secondhand at that same music store in Hawaii where I bought the Red Dirt. I actually bought those the same day, and I thought, oh, it says Bright, but who cares? It's probably the same tone. Actually, no, that Bright repeats really kind of bothered me, and although it has the same function and the same quality of delay of the Carbon Copy, the tone isn't the same. And maybe with an electric it works well with a band, but with that acoustic, like I mentioned, I use it with the acoustic, that plingy high end that the acoustic has, those Bright repeats don't really make it sound good with that. So good pedal, not necessarily my favorite. I prefer the old one, and you can tell it's from Hawaii because of that nice rust going on the switch. A lot of salt in the air, a lot of stuff like that. One of my first ever pedals right here, Way Huge Aquapus. This is when they first reissued the Way Huge line. I thought they were the coolest looking pedals, coolest sounding pedals. There was also when I was first getting into guitar playing, and nowadays you go on the internet, go to YouTube, and you'll see tons of pedal demos, tons of stuff like that. When I first started playing, there wasn't a ton of it, but when Dunlop reintroduced this, they came out with all sorts of videos for it, so they just blew my mind. I thought it was like a long delay, like it would make all kinds of like long spacey delays, but since it's analog, it's actually a very short delay, even like all the way up. It's only like 300 milliseconds, which isn't very long. To give you some context, I think that pedal has like quadruple the amount of delay time that this one has. But a very unique sound, perfect name for a pedal, Aquapus, because if you play it and you listen to how it sounds, that's just what it sounds like. It just sounds like that name. My rig when I was a kid growing up was very much Blues Breaker, into this overdrive, into this overdrive, into the Aquapus, and that was my entire rig. It's a great pedal. I found out that Jeff Beck, whenever he did his rockabilly tour, playing a lot of like old Les Paul songs, I don't know if it was on that specific board of that specific night, but that Les Paul or Rock and Roll Party honoring Les Paul with Jeff Beck, one of the greatest live guitar performances, in my opinion, of all time. One of my favorites. I watch it like once a year. I know that that tour that he was playing those songs, he used this instead of an Echoplex. I don't know if that particular night what he was using, but if that's what Jeff Beck used to get those tones, it's good enough for me. On the market of those slapback tones, this is one of my favorite slapback deals. This flashback is cool, the little one, because you can do that. If you use an app, you can beam professional guitar players. They get on, they make their own tone prints, which is their own custom delay with a huge computer editor with tons of parameters, not just 3 knobs, tons of parameters, create cool stuff. And they make little tone prints of it, and you can beam them from your guitar or from your phone on the back pickup of your guitar while this is plugged up, and you can beam it to it. So this one right here has a Josh Smith tone print, which these 2 knobs don't really do anything, however they're set. but it's a 2 slapbacks. One slapback is kind of that, you know, a lot of really short repeats that kind of make it sound like an old school, like Sun Records type thing. Almost like kind of like a short delay on this side. Very old school, very vibey, and has some ducking, which means it gets out of the way you're playing. And then when you turn it all the way this way, it's a little bit longer slapback, but it's just one loud repeat. And they're both very usable. They're both one of those that, like, if you're in a room that's just dead and your reverb on your amp isn't really doing it for you, plug this in. It's an immediate tone fixer. And like, you don't have to mess with the knobs. You have to find a good delay setting on it with that particular tone print. Next delay I have is this cool Echolec pedal. I just needed something. I've sold a lot of delay pedals over the years because I'm kind of finicky with how they sound. Got rid of, actually, mentioning Jason Elmore in this Landgraf, I actually did a swap with him with a Strymon Timeline for that pedal. And it's funny because neither one of us, I don't really use that Landgraf that much, and I don't think he uses that Timeline that much, but I used it a lot, but at the time I just thought, man, I need that more than I need the Timeline. And he thought he needed Timeline more than he needed that, so we both don't need either one of them, but we had a good even swap. Anyways, I need a long, pretty delay, and this Echolec does that. It's based off of a four drum head type old school pedal that has 4 like set time delays, and they could be rhythmic. They're really this tone of Dave Gilmour, Echoes, that live at Pompeii tone with all those crazy delays. They're rhythmic delays because like they'll repeat at different times. And this knob right here kind of helps you program how you do that. Of course, modern technology, modern digital technology, this one has way more functionality than that giant, expensive drum delay rack would have. And this one's cool because all old gear like Echorecs, Echoplexes, Univibe type stuff, all those things, they always say how they suck the tone. That's because all the stuff back then had to have like 2 preamps and had to have these like basically mini amps built into them for them to work, not like a DC power supply. So those tones, some of them say they sucked tone, some of them say that they affected the tone in a really positive way because they're like preamps. In fact, they even make pedals now that are just the preamps of like Echoplexes, not even the delay function. And because of that, the way that preamp worked, it made the delays sound different. So like if you hit it really hard, the delay repeats would sound different. If you hit it really soft, it would do other things. And so they imitate that really well with Callanbred. Callanbred, they're the same guys that make that pedal. I think Callanbred makes some really cool stuff. I want to get more of their pedals in the future. Anyways, that's what this one does. This one's really cool because my favorite thing about all this gear is stuff that makes it sound organic. Something that sounds organic, which will segue us into our next topic. Actually, we'll do this real quick first too. Strymon makes amazing stuff. I use this most of the time. Playing old gear like old supers, sometimes the reverb can get noisy. This is the best reverb pedal if you like that just straight up blackface tube amp reverb type stuff. Buy this. Same thing for the tremolo. That harmonic tremolo is really something. I think these guys started the harmonic tremolo thing. Also one of the greatest tremolo pedals in the market, but like I said about Boss breaks. It just breaks. They're good stuff, but they break, you know. So that pedal doesn't work anymore. But getting to our next function, like I said, my favorite thing I like about gear like this is it's organic. It has to react the same way my amp reacts and the way my guitar reacts, which kind of gives us our next category, which is fuzz. It took me a while to come around to fuzz, but this is one I like a lot. This is one for like somebody who doesn't like fuzz, but they need to start getting into it. This line of TC Electronics, these ones that are super heavy, they're super heavy, super big, really cool knobs on them, really cool switches. That's how it switches on and on. It's supposed to be true bypass, which is cool too. This is a fuzz. Well, I call 2 categories of fuzzes. There's fuzz that's like, actually there's probably a million categories of fuzz. But I have 2 categories. One's like a fuzz drive. Make no mistake, it's not an overdrive pedal. It's not at all. It does something totally different. but it functions like a drive pedal would. It's like, okay, you turn the knob, you get more fuzz. You turn that volume, you get more volume. You turn this, you get more tone, either way. But every time you turn it on, it's a fuzz. You get fuzz out of it. Let's contrast that with what would be more like a vintage fuzz or like an original fuzz. One of my favorite pedals ever right here. You can kind of tell this is my board, so this is what I use the most. These fuzz pedals, volume does something really, really different on this one. It does just increase the volume, but this is way more organic. It's like a small amp when it comes in, although it's very, very simple circuitry. The old school fuzz faces, they were giant pedals, but they only had like that much circuitry in it. If you can tell how much very little amount of circuitry board to it. SI stands for silicon. Like I said, there's actually a million different categories for fuzz, but it has silicon transistors as opposed to germanium, which were the two most popular transistors used in the 60s. This one's made by, see if it's got his name on it somewhere. Ugly Velcro on that, sorry about that. Jesse Davey from Kingtone, who is a monster blues rock guitar player, and he makes some of the best pedals because he is such a great guitar player. He like makes gig-worthy gear, so it's loud. Good thing about this fuzz pedal, it's very loud. But this is one of those types that the way you react with your volume on like a single coil guitar and a really cranked up amp, and it's one of those, this is more volatile. The drive type fuzzes, you can put them in front of just about anything and you're gonna get what's on the tin. What's on the box is what it's gonna do. It's gonna sound like a fuzz. This one, you gotta have the temperature outside's gotta be right. If you kick it with your foot one direction, it'll pick up a radio signal instead of being loud. You need your amp to be cranked up loud. And you know, the way you attack the guitar makes it sound different here. And you kind of ask yourself, well, why would I do all that? You know, why would I have to deal with something so volatile and it may not even sound good this day? Well, that's why, you know, we have pedals like the Rusty Fuzz or the hundreds and thousands of other fuzz pedals on the market. But there's something special about these. This is the kind of stuff that if this was around in the day, this is something closer to what Hendrix would have used, something closer to what Stevie would have used, something what Eric Johnson would use, things like that. It's volatile, but the tone's there, and it really, like I said, I have other videos that demonstrate it, where I just turn down the volume on your guitar, and honestly, you could leave this pedal on all night. You could leave it on all night and go from very, very clean pedal tone, very, very clean tones, to like in between bluesy crunch tones to full-on lead, crazy fuzz, all without even touching any knobs on there. So it's kind of versatile in a different way. And then my last little overdrive pedal we'll go over. This one I bought because everyone said to buy it. Everyone said to get it, and it was at my local shop when I lived in Hawaii, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. If you folks picked up on that stuff I'm mentioning about Hawaii, I used to live in Hawaii, and the thing about living in Hawaii is everything's really small there, and everything's really crowded, which means you can't really play that loud there. You'll have your amp set something closer to here and still get talked about, when pedals like the ones I have on the floor sound better when they're set around there. 40 watt 1967 Super Reverb, maybe 45 watt, just so you guys know. That's what I've been talking about amp wise. Pedals like this are a little bit more, they're kind of similar to the fuzz. They're very much professional style pedals. They want to be played loud. They want to be played with a lot of dynamics, a lot of touch. They kind of depend on you as a player to make them sound better. I'm gonna pick it up so I'm not crouching down. Get it in the light here. It's based off of a very famous pedal called the Klon Centaur, hence the Archer guy right there. Pedal is worth like $3,500 now, maybe $2,000. Used to be worth like $800, $900 whenever I was first starting to play out, which was still might as well have been $4,000 when I was a kid. But it's one of the most sought after overdrive pedals. And the idea is it's similar but different to pedals like this and like these. It does something a little bit different. It's very much like a clean boost pedal. It just boosts the sound, makes it kind of what would be like a transparent overdrive. Their settings are better with the gain really low and the output and the treble kind of high. Treble is kind of the same as a tone knob. It's just a little bit more on the higher end frequency wise. Crank this up too much and it starts basically just sounding like one of these. But if you keep it down low, it does something a little bit more special, which is, again, if you played that through a quiet amp, it's like, oh, it's just a little bit louder and a little bit more obnoxious to hear. But if you play it through an amp that's really driving really hard, man, it's just something really magical about it. And it just kind of, it does things that this kind of, the thing that's great about a tube screamer is it kind of takes away the top and the bottom and boosts the mids. But that doesn't really sound, it sounds very nasally, which is very good. It's the reason why it's so popular. But this kind of does that, but still kind of remains like a more natural guitar tone. It's more like an artificial guitar tone with those. Doesn't mean them bad. Doesn't make them bad at all. In fact, Stevie used these while there were other pedals on the market because he said that nothing did what these two did. This one wasn't on the market then, and I feel like from my ear and from what I hear Stevie use, I think that if he would have been alive while this pedal was around and popular, he probably would have used something more like this to get that tone than overdrive. That's just my opinion. The El Macombo, if you want the El Macombo sound, get you a couple of those amps, and you can get one or two. You can get one of these, but I think if you get one of these, you would also get very close to that sound. And I say this type of pedal because it's a clone type, and you can look online and see there's millions of clones. They spell clone with a K because clone is spelled K-L-O-N. So they spell clone K-L-O-N with an E, kind of cute thing like that. And in my opinion, of all the clones, there's probably 100 of them out there of the clone, the original one. The JHS Rocket is the best looking one. So if you care about having a cool looking pedal, kind of a little tongue-in-cheek thing there because they all sound pretty good. The differences are so minute. This one is my pick of choice. One pedal I forgot to mention, I don't know why I skipped over it. This is another Jesse Davey, the same guy that makes that fuzz pedal. Jesse Davey King Tone thing. This is something that I kind of put it in the middle here because it's everything from this pedal to that clone to this boost to any one of these. It's very, very unique. Everything Jesse Davey makes is amazing. Great name, very bright LED lights, awesome pedal, cool knobs too, man. Everything he does looks great. Honorable mentions here. Wah-Wah, I mentioned before, my first ever pedal was a Vox Crybaby, a Vox wah pedal. It broke one day, and I just stopped using it. I used to think that wah was awesome, then I used to think it wasn't awesome, and now I think it's awesome again. I just now bought a Crybaby Classic, which is that pedal right there, trying to figure out how it works with that fuzz, which has kind of been fun, playing it nice and loud, trying to figure out, before, after, that whole deal. And then same thing with this guy right here. I bought this from a guy on Instagram who makes real deal vibe pedals, like Univibe type stuff. And this is one of those. It's it's like that fuzz. It's like some days it works, some days it doesn't, some days it sucks a lot of tone, and some days it's just the most beautiful sound ever. It's very big, but I think to be like a real Univibe, some people make Univibes are like that size, but they're not. They're just a phaser pedal, which is this MXR pedal, which is a phaser pedal that's kind of voiced a sound like a vibe. But the big ones like this have light bulbs, which affect the sound somehow. I don't know the technology. But anyways, that's pretty much the roundup. Long video, I know. I didn't think it'd be this long. But that's all my tones and sounds and stuff. Y'all see, if you look at the rest of my channel, you'll see me playing a lot of this stuff. But just a discussion. Really, it's just about 1 a.m. I've been up with the baby all day and all night, so I'm just kind of bored talking about my stuff because I can't play it. Anyways, signing out.